Hello once again, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our open longsword playbook. So as I said in the first one, I'm only really doing these after the classes have completed a set, so that way they can remember and reference back. And join me once again is Randy, who's going to help me out. So if you haven't seen episode 1, you should go back and watch that, as this is building upon it. But basically, what this is meant to be is a playbook for starting off effectual level play, so that's early gear, early days, light stuff. However, it's not building any bad habits when you eventually make the transition up into full body. So, last time we talked about all about the attacks related to the top, this pie slice idea, so corner of my head, this. Now we're going to start talking about how to widen your attacks and the kind of wide game. Now by wide, I'm talking about lateral, not necessarily linear distance. So, firstly, the big thing you want to avoid when it comes to going into here is we are not cutting wider. So if normally my cut would be 45 at the widest, here, to achieve wide, I am not widening this cut. You can, but every tick you go closer to cutting horizontal, you lose out on pressure. There is no winning in that regard. If Randy's sword is on a 45-degree line, regardless of up or down, and I am on more of a horizontal line, he always will have more pressure. It's just how it works. So I don't want to take that risk by trying to widen myself that way. So instead what we do is we use offline movement. If I perform a simple 45-degree cut at Randy's head, and I step straight forward, it comes down onto the corner of his mask, which is generally where we're looking for. To widen this cut, I use the same action, but I step my feet further to the side, now causing that same cut to just come down one tick over, thus threatening the side of his head. Now the reason you want to do this is because, as we talked about before, defending up here, not necessarily that hard, pretty easy, and it's a relatively small target. Defending on the wider game, certainly when it comes to playing full gear, that's going to be a much bigger thing. But also, if Randy tries to use any of the defenses we talked about last time, for example, a hanging parry up, that doesn't necessarily always cover you quite as far, because now I'm much further down on the weak of his sword, not to mention he's having to predict not just where he's moving, but also where my sword is going. There's a lot of factors in there that now, basically everything we went over before, doesn't quite work as well. So we need a new defense against this. Well, so first off, let's talk about how to launch a wide parry. It really is just offline movement, but what I did for sake of fun in the class is we went ahead and used a different style of cut as well. So what we did before is we did 3 cuts from above, then we did a little bit of 2 cuts from the shoulder. Now we're going to do a 2 cut, so I am still cutting out to Randy, but from a deepened shoulder. So I put this on my shoulder, and I take my torso over, and then I tick back. What this causes is when I unfurl this, I get a little bit more shoulder power in my cut. Should be pretty familiar for those of you that do more advanced stuff. And this also encourages me to step wider when I cut, because I feel like I'm coming from the side. The trick with it is to wait for the cut to actually be coming out before you step. So I will show that now. I'll cut once on each side. So cut number 1, I tick over, tick up. There's my strike. Note that it hits him in the side of the head or the jaw. I am not going down into the neck. We still are targeting the head. What if I do on the other side? Tick over, tick up. Same idea. Just out to the side. Nothing complicated. So against these cuts, how do you defend yourself? The movement is like so. These are what I call walls. When I later get into a different sort of combo, I will explain why I named this. But the wall is generally going to be done in 2 ways. If you're getting attacked toward your left side, odds are you're probably here or here, usually here. In which case, the way you move it is I'm just going to pretty much trade place with my sword. I'm going to push my sword across my body so that it lines up with my left hip. At the same time, I'm going to step behind it, making this nice little strong shape. The trick here is I don't want to push too far. This is not me reaching out, and I'm not even trying to apply any pressure. I'm just going firmly to this place where now my core is in front of my sword, meaning nothing's getting through that. The other trick with this that you'll commonly see people mess up is they'll stand more like this, where the pommel is in front of the femoral triangle. This may feel more solid, but is not nearly as solid as the tip can get buffeted to the side. But if instead, my pommel is in front of my core, yes, the tip can still move, but it's going to stay more connected to me because it is more connected to me, as opposed to being its own independent thing. So that's your wall on the left. Your wall on the right, I generally prefer to have people learn to do it from here, as most times you're going to have to use it, you've already committed to a strike or things along those lines since you don't stand here. As such, what you do is you lift your point up from where you are, then turn the edge as you step behind it. This side is always going to be a little bit closer to you because your arms cross, but it is equally strong. What you don't want to get into the habit of is trying to bring this down. That will add unnecessary movement. It's quite literally just up, over, make sure you've got that 45 roll, or you're going to lose your fingers. So, with these two defenses in mind, let's talk about now the cuts coming in. So what we're going to do is we're going to have Randy throw 2 cuts because it's very unlikely if someone cuts wide at you that they're just one and done. They are usually trying to get you to move side to side so they can chase you down. So we'll start off at the shoulder. Randy throws his first wide cut. I defend myself. I defend myself. Note that I'm not trying to reach out to him. I'm just moving away from where his cut is, and that's the next most important part of this whole shebang. When someone is stepping wide against you, let them fully terminate their cut. Okay. What I mean by this is if I try to reach out and catch Randy when he moves, cutting the angle, I bring more of myself closer to him in that middle line. While he is playing the wide game right now, at any point if I put something right here, he does not have to move as far to hit me, i.e. a wrist cut or things along those lines. Instead, what I really want to do, go ahead and throw a cut again, Randy. I would really like to be over here. So his cut is only reaching at the very, very end, which stretches him out, which means if he wants to go all the way to the other side, he has to move all the way over there before he can get me. This is what makes the wall parry so effective. You're not doing very much. He's doing all the hard work, meaning that I will always see his next cut coming. I can't stop Randy from just cutting at me like a weed whacker, but I can make him work harder, and eventually he will run out of gas. The other thing along with this is, like I said, I am not reaching out to him. I'm going to parry right here. This is where he's attacking me. Anything beyond that, I don't care about. If I try to reach out, I'm putting things in danger. And once the hands become a target, this is going to be a big thing. So here's those 2 parries again. So Randy cuts wide at me. I make that defense. I make that defense. This will also protect you in case they're trying to cut more for your shoulder, your arm, your neck. It's the same parry. I don't change anything. By having my sword right here or here, he will not be able to strike me. Now, the next part about this is the riposte from here. What you're looking for on a good parry is you'll get what I call a constellation. Now, like I said, it's very rare that you're going to have someone just cut once, but it does happen. The constellation is the 3 points of his sword, my sword, and his face. So, Randy throws that first wide cut in and I do my defense here. He's stretched out. I can identify where his point is, which means it's not a danger. I can identify where my point is, and then from there, see where his face is. What I currently have is I can see more of Randy than I can of our swords. This is a good time to go forward. This is a successful parry. The way I execute this technique is I'm going to then push my pommel forward to where the swords are connecting. At the same time, I'm going to just let my hands naturally invert. This is not me adding extra pressure to Randy's action. That will cause me to miss. Instead, I let him be a guide for where that point is going to go, which means I won't miss, and I'll always hit right on that throat. The hands are what's extending first. My body is only following if it must, and it's just the lead foot. You don't pass on these. Left arm, lat, foot. That's all you need. Let's do that again. Randy throws his cut down. I defend. 1, 2, 3. Cool. Left hand. Over we go. Nice and straightforward. Then when I come back, I just rewind the motion I had, and I'm perfectly safe. This one can take a while to get used to. Let's switch sides and let's show it from that side. The biggest thing is recognizing when you have a successful parry. So for example, Randy throws a cut down against me wide. I don't get hit, but I'm seeing more sword than I am of Randy. This is not a time to try and go forward because I would have to muscle that over, or if you're less experienced, you might try to reach around. These are not good things. Instead, a good parry, Randy cuts down wide. I got it, point 1, point 2, point 3. Nice in there. And because I'm not adding any pressure against his sword, just letting him guide me in, I pretty much can hit the same spot over and over and over again. And that's great for when you need to launch a quick riposte. Now, so let's switch sides again. The next thing about this is doing it on the other side. The thrust is absolutely still available. However, and this is true on the left side too, but it's a little better on the right, you can also do a cut. I find a little more on the right side. And the reason for that is that my hands are crossed when they parry, meaning that pulling them open again is quite easy to do. You can still do it on this side, but it just feels a little sweeter here. So we'll have Randy cut twice, and then I'll do the riposte in the last one. So parry number 1, parry number 2. Again, I need to identify that I have that constellation. On this side, that may involve you stepping a little more up as opposed to just purely lateral, but either way, point 1, point 2, point 3. If I want to do the thrust, it's the same exact motion. If I want to do the cut, it works like so. I pull my pommel away from his sword. I don't care about maintaining pressure. Randy's action stopped. I pull away, which lines my sword up with his face. Then from here, if I pass forward to cut him, I get too close. So instead, I will step offline with both of my feet in a little simple step on the oblique line and let my sword merely drag through his face. Then I will turn my pommel back to my hip, compass stepping naturally to cover that line. At first, it feels very wooden. In time, you will learn how to launch this very quickly. And furthermore, what you should look out for is that you're not getting in the habit of reaching with your hands. Let this cut be delivered with the body. If they're close enough, you don't need to step. You don't need to step. If they're far enough, you do. You don't want to risk whipping at this distance. So we'll show that again on this side, then we'll do it on the other side. Cut number 1, defense. Cut number 2, defense, hands, body, hands, body. Let's switch sides. Same idea. Cut number 1, defense. Cut number 2, defense, hands, body, back. If your arms are well extended right in front of your core as they should be, when you pull them open, they should be right where you need them to be. You shouldn't need to really do any adjustment. May take a little bit of practice though, depending upon the cuts that are coming in. So if you notice any sort of inconsistency, re-examine to make sure everyone's actually targeting what they should be. And then things ought to work out. So, that's the first part of the wide game. The next part of the wide game to cap this off is then we introduce cuts from below. Now, cuts from below are part of the wide game because they have to be. Whenever you do a cut from below, you are running 2 important risks. Well, really 1 risk, but it's dealt with in 2 ways. You must get your sword adequately high enough to protect your head, because you're fighting gravity the whole way through, and or you must get your body far enough offline to protect your head. So what I mean by this is whenever I throw a cut from below, if I were to stop, for example, on Randy's arm and not continue through, my sword will stop in front of us, meaning there's nothing between his head and me. He doesn't even necessarily have to reach very high to get me. Furthermore, when I cut from below, if I step straight forward, even if I do get my hands all the way up in the way, it's not hard for him to go around me here, right? It's a relatively narrow shape, meaning he can put that attack wherever he wants to. So being offline and high is how you lock out the superior structure from above, because gravity is helping it, and he can put that wherever he wants. So, the time you cut high in the factual rule set is different than the time you cut low is different than the time you would in full body sparring. Reason being because the arms aren't target. So, if we were talking arms are target, full waist up, then absolutely I can launch through cuts at his wrists if they are exposed, and you always do a through cut on the wrist because you do not want to get stuck like I just said. In the case of factual though, it's always going to be a 2 cut. Reason being is that a through cut at the head doesn't make much sense. I want to make sure that I pop this and then am guarded against what he would do. So what prompts this action? What prompts it is him doing a high parry and staying there. This comes in 2 forms. Either he parries with his cross guard, a la a frontale or crone style guard, or instead, he does a hanging parry and doesn't move out of it. He gets stuck here and just stays there. That also opens up these opportunities. So let's look at the former first. I want to start off with a nice, good 2 cut. A little bit of offline is okay, but generally I want this to be relatively narrow game. I throw my cut, he defends himself. My next action, since he defended with the crone, I'm going to lift my pommel up first. This ensures he doesn't get an immediate shot at the top of my head. I'm then going to free my sword by pulling it around in place so it's lined up with my hip. Then I will squeeze and step, meaning I hit his head and his head only, and am protected against him trying to hit my head. The reason you take so long to step is because cuts from below are very difficult to aim. Even at their sheerest, that requires you to turn your body practically sideways. If you rush it, odds are you'll actually end up cutting next to him rather than toward him. But if you take that time to fully line it up with your hip, you'll never miss, frankly. So here is that again. I throw my cut down, he defends high, up, rotate, step. And my target is the same place we were just going, here into the jaw pretty much because of my offline movement. Now, if you are doing righty on righty and he does the cross guard parry, generally you're going to cut from your left. However, if he does the hanging parry, you may get two different options. So let's look at that real quick. I throw my cut down and Randy does one of the hanging parries. Cool, I have two opportunities here. The first target zone is between his tip and his elbow, kind of a greater than symbol, if you're familiar with that. That would be where your widest, most natural cut you go. The second target opportunity you have is between his hands. It will vary depending upon what your opponent does as to which is more appealing. So for example, right now, I could actually go for either pretty comfortably. We'll show the one from the left that we just did for sake of, and then I'll show you the one from the right. So in this situation, I would lift, turn, pop right up that line, and I'm safe from his sword because where my strong ends up, he still can't do anything. However, alternatively, because this target is available, and maybe for whatever reason I'm afraid of doing that, I can instead take what is known as a double stab from the right. So for this, I push my pommel forward to free my sword by lifting my tip, invert my hands in place, and then once again I'm going to start with the tip, then my hands, and I'm going to do a little simple step like we just did toward my right, here, up between the hands so I'm nice and safe. Again, my guard is high and very easy to protect myself with. I must caution you, out of the two, the cut from the left, if you cut from the right versus the right hand, is superior because it's going up and down your dominant line. It's always going to work out better. It's just going to lead to better things. However, the cut from the right again can be very useful if there is no other target, but you need to do a cut from below. The thing to watch out for it though, is even at its best, it makes a gap instead of the cut from the left, which does not make a gap the whole time. So just for comparison, if you'll take a step back, Randy. Actually, if you would hold your sword out horizontally here. Perfect, yeah, that'll work. Watch the gap between my sword tip and the space beyond it. So I do my first cut, boom. My cut from the left, it makes a gap for the smallest period of time, and that's immediately filled with my shield. From the right, though, it goes away for a while, and that's what makes it dangerous, is that that pullback gives him time to come in against me. So, but both should absolutely be used if they are still good devices to make use of. We'll show them one more time. We'll just have you do a hanging parry, and I'll show both of that. So, I throw my cut from above, he defends. If I want to cut from my left, I invert, turn, up between the hands. Or if I want to cut from the right, back, turn, up with the two-step. If for whatever reason you can't land the cut, these can also be used as the thrust. Now, the final part of this, and the last bit, is we cap this off with a combination. It's an important thing to remember with combinations is that you can't force them. You cannot just force your will onto somebody. You have to provide stimulus, see what they do, and then work from there. So in this case, to start this combo, I must get Randy to parry high. How he parries high? Doesn't really matter. I just need to get him to go up there. So my very first attack will be from above, a nice two-cut that gives me room. I throw my cut, he defends high, meaning I can do my next step. My next step is I'm going to go ahead and cut from below to provoke him into having to do the wide parry that we just did. Because cuts from below, cuts from above, like I said, anything coming wide is parried by one of those walls. So, I cut from below, he defends himself. Now the big trick about this, the whole thing the combo was setting up, is I could have hit him on either of those, but this one guarantees I will. The pressure that I get from cutting from below and him making this wall, my hands will keep going into this gap when my tip stops. Meaning that that final cut is just a really tight turnover, practically on the same line that my sword was already on. That's what makes the combo so sweet. This down, up, down is not that I'm just, cutting wildly at Randy. It's that the first gets him where I want him, the second forces him to go wide, and then the third, I've put myself back into the middle. Which means that my action, even done slowly, tempo-wise, is very, very fast. And that's really what most fast attacks should be like. It's not you being able to move physically faster than your opponent, it's that the timing was so perfect. Let's switch sides and show that again. So again, one step back. So same idea, I cut from above, I cut from below, I cut down. and then my right leg and that step is relative. In a vacuum, I just step up to support my cut. Realistically, Randy may be running backward, he may be trying to move laterally to get some space, he may even be coming forward. That right step can go wherever it needs to go to support that shape, including backwards. So, and by that it would be a left step back. But really that could be whatever. Now the combo also works if instead I do the double step. So I cut down from my right, boom, I cut up from my right, boom, I now cut down from my left. The trick with this one is the cut's going to be a little shorter. Make sure your hand stays up in place so you get that nice tall cut instead of down here, which does not get you any good action, brings me too close, he's definitely going to stick you. But otherwise, that is part 2 of our open longsword playbook. We learned the wide game. We learned how to parry cuts from above and cuts from below because they both work on the same vein. And we learned about our first real combination instead of just follow through. Remember, combos only work if your opponent is going along the track with you. If at any point during that Randy had tried to riposte or things along those lines, I could probably still use parts of the combo to defend and keep going, but the combo itself is now done. You have to still listen to them as you're taking them down. Otherwise though, next time we'll start moving into the center line game, and we'll get there probably in a month or 2. Either way though, thank you Randy, and thank you all very much for watching. We'll go over some other techniques another time.